You know, usually when we talk about returning to a beloved, like a long-running video game franchise, there's this underlying expectation of comfort.
Right, yeah, like slipping on a worn-in sweater.
Exactly. You expect the familiar rules, the familiar faces. You boot up the game, you step into the tall grass, see a Pidgey or a Rattata, and the game just sort of whispers, welcome back. Everything is exactly as you left it.
It's a very specific kind of safety, a warm blanket of nostalgia that, frankly, developers usually rely on to guarantee sales.
But then you step into the world of Pokémon Black and White, and suddenly that warm blanket isn't just pulled away, it is practically set on fire.
Yeah, they really didn't hold back.
Not at all. I mean, you are standing in the middle of a bustling, totally unfamiliar metropolis. The camera is swooping around you in 3 dimensions, towering skyscrapers are blocking out the sun, and, like, businessmen are physically bumping into you as they rush past.
And you don't recognize a single creature in the grass either.
Right. You have no idea what you're looking at. We are looking at a design philosophy that is actively, meticulously trying to alienate you.
It is the absolute definition of a calculated displacement. And, they executed it with a level of uncompromising artistic vision that the franchise had never seen before and honestly, arguably, hasn't seen since.
And that profound sense of displacement is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We are going to explore the Unova region of Generation 5.
It's a massive topic.
Oh, it really is. We're looking at a digital canvas that spans deeply philosophical dragons, mathematically broken code, historical rabbit holes ranging from the Byzantine Empire to ancient Mesopotamia.
Which is still wild to me.
I know, right? And we're also going to look at an antagonist who literally weaponizes the very concept of empathy.
And to do this justice, we've pulled together an incredibly dense stack of materials. I mean, we're drawing from comprehensive academic-style analyses of the game's evolutionary paradigms. We've mined through massive data troves on Bulbapedia and Cerebi.
Plus all those crazy Reddit deep dives and fan theories.
Exactly. We also analyzed the raw game code. But I really want to specifically highlight some incredibly thorough YouTube investigations from creators who have spent years unearthing the hidden mechanics of this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we dive any deeper into this, I want to take a moment to highly recommend that you check out the Decoding the Dark YouTube channel.
Oh, their breakdown of the game's back-end architecture alone is just staggering. Highly recommended.
It really is.
Right.
The kind of meticulous, fascinating research they do is exactly what fuels conversations like the one we're about to have today. So please, head over there, give their videos a like, and subscribe to their channel. Supporting creators who dare to look closer at the media we love is what keeps this entire ecosystem thriving.
For sure.
All right, so let's set the stage here. Let's look at the actual canvas of Unova. Because to understand this game, I feel like you have to understand the specific mindset of the developers at Game Freak around, 2010?
Right around then, yeah. They were coming off the massive success of Generation 4, but internally they were feeling trapped.
Like they painted themselves into a corner.
Exactly. So this game was designed from the ground up as a soft reboot. And for the very first time in the history of the franchise, they explicitly left a Japan-inspired setting. They packed their bags, crossed the ocean, and looked directly at New York City.
Which was a massive creative risk. I mean, Junichi Masuda, the game's director, spoke quite candidly about this era in those old Iwata Asks interviews.
Yeah, he realized that after 4 generations spanning nearly 15 years, Game Freak's own developmental mindset had become, well, dangerously rigid.
They had a formula, and they were coasting on it.
Exactly. And the players had developed this rote muscle memory. Think about it. You walk into a new town, you immediately scan for the red roof of the Pokemon Center, you heal, you look for the gym, you move on.
You aren't really experiencing the world at that point. You're just processing it.
Right. And Masuda wanted to violently break those fixed conceptions.
And to do that, he didn't just look at New York City as a geographical map. He looked at its artistic heart. He actually traveled to the Museum of Modern Art MoMA in Manhattan, specifically to find inspiration for the layout, the aesthetic, and the foundational design philosophy of Unova.
Which is fascinating.
It is. And if you think about what MoMA represents, it makes perfect sense for a game trying to reinvent itself.
It really does. Modern art is fundamentally about rejecting traditional perspectives, right? It's about deconstruction. When you walk through MoMA, you aren't looking at classical, comfortable landscapes. You're looking at cubism, surrealism, abstract expressionism.
Art that challenges your brain to find new ways of seeing form and function.
Exactly. And Masuda took that ethos of deconstruction and applied it to the core Pokemon formula. He wanted the towns to feel geometric, imposing, and completely divorced from the quaint, naturalistic villages of Kanto or Johto.
And they push that alienation to the absolute extreme with the Pokédex. I mean, to force players into this state of vulnerable discovery, they introduced 156 brand new Pokémon.
A huge roster.
Huge. But here is the brilliant, ruthless kicker. They completely locked out every single older Pokemon until the post-game. No Pikachu, no Zubat in the caves, no Geodude, nothing.
It was incredibly polarizing at the time. I remember a lot of older fans were furious about it.
Oh yeah, people were so mad.
But psychologically, it was a masterstroke. It was designed to synthetically recreate the childhood magic of the very first games.
Because you didn't know anything.
Right. If you think back to playing Pokemon Red and Blue in 1996, part of the magic was your own ignorance. You had no idea what was around the next corner. You didn't know what types were effective against what. You didn't know when a creature would evolve.
By locking out the old roster, Game Freak leveled the playing field entirely. They prevented older players from relying on their accumulated 15 years of knowledge.
Yeah, you couldn't just catch a Kadabra and sweep the game. You had to learn alongside the brand new generation of kids.
I've always thought of this design choice as being exactly like moving to a new city for college.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
You know, the incredibly specific feeling. You step off the plane or you pull up in a packed car and you're standing on a sidewalk where you don't recognize a single face. You don't know the street signs, you don't know the local etiquette, you don't even know where to get a decent cup of coffee.
Yeah, there's this potent, heavy mix of profound anxiety because your safety net is just gone.
Exactly. But intertwined with that anxiety is this incredible wide-eyed wonder. Everything's a discovery. That alienation isn't a punishment, it's a requirement for a deeper learning experience.
That is a phenomenal analogy, because when you're stripped of your habits, you're forced to be present. And that sense of a bustling, overwhelming new city wasn't just thematic. Game Freak engineered it deeply into the visual presentation, too.
Oh, the visuals are incredible.
Black and White represents the absolute pinnacle of their 2D pixel art era, but they were pushing the Nintendo DS hardware to its breaking point by incorporating these fully 3D sweeping architectural environments.
The Skyro Bridge is the perfect example of this. You step out of the pinwheel forest, and suddenly the camera detaches from its traditional top-down perspective. It drops down behind your character, and you are just this tiny, insignificant pixel figure running across this massive, spiraling suspension bridge.
While a colossal 3D skyline looms in the distance, panning dynamically as you move.
It makes you feel so small.
Yeah.
And then you walk into Castilia City, the Manhattan equivalent, and it's not like the old 2D routes where a few NPCs are just standing still waiting for you to talk to them.
No, Castilia City is alive with indifference.
Yes, indifference is the perfect word.
There are throngs of faceless people rushing past you in circular patterns on the sidewalks, and they're moving at a faster frame rate than the standard NPCs.
Which is so jarring the first time you see it.
And if you try to stand in their way, they don't stop to chat. They literally clip past you, pushing you aside because they have places to be. You are not the center of their universe.
It fundamentally changes your relationship with the game world.
Yeah.
And that dynamic movement translated directly into the battle screen, too. Like, in all the previous generations, the Pokemon sprites were static.
Maybe they had a tiny 2-second animation when they entered the battle.
Right, but then they froze into a rigid pose. In Black and White, the sprites never stop moving. They're constantly breathing, shifting their weight, reacting.
Because the battle engine was entirely rewritten to support skeletal animation for 2D sprites, the camera became an active participant. It zooms in tight on your Pokemon when they land a critical hit, making the pixels blocky and raw.
It's so cool.
It dynamically pans out during the newly introduced triple battles to show all 6 combatants on the field at once. It created this incredibly cinematic, kinetic experience that just refused to let your eyes rest.
Which brings us to the realization that an overwhelming, bustling visual environment needs an equally complex sensory layer to support it, right? You don't just look at a metropolis, you hear it. And the visual kinetic energy of Castilia City naturally leads us right into the soundscape of Generation 5. Because the audio engineering here is, frankly, unparalleled in the franchise. The music was designed to breathe and react to your specific state, just like a real city reacts to the people moving through it.
The dynamic audio engineering is subtle at first, but once you notice it, it completely rewires how you interact with the environment.
Oh, for sure.
In standard video game design, a town or a route has a single looped audio track, but Unova's audio is state-dependent. Let's look at the movement-based changes. On most of the standard routes, routes 2 through 16, when your character is just standing still or walking at a normal pace, you hear the bass melody, the woodwinds, the synths.
Sounds like standard Pokemon.
Right. But the millisecond you hold down the B button to run, or the moment you hop onto your bicycle, the game engine dynamically triggers a hidden audio stem. Specifically, a driving snare drum percussion layer kicks in, perfectly synced to match your accelerated pace.
It's brilliant. And on Route 1, the very first route in the game, it's not a snare drum, it's a tambourine.
Yeah.
It's this joyful, bouncy addition that literally rewards you for moving forward. But where this audio design evolves from a neat trick into an absolute masterpiece is how the NPCs interact with the music. Game Freak actually asks the player to be mindful, to explore not just for hidden items or rare encounters, but to explore for sound.
It demands active listening. The music isn't passive background noise, it's a living ecosystem.
Give us an example of that.
Well, if you walk into a Cumula town early in the game, the initial theme is very simple, almost sparse.
Oh.
But if you explore and walk into a specific house in the top right corner, you'll find two musicians, a pianist and a drummer.
Right.
If you speak to them, they don't just give you a line of dialogue, they actively start playing their instruments. And the game's audio engine permanently layers their piano and drum stems into the town's background track for as long as you stay in the area.
It's so cool.
And in Nakreen City, there's an accordion player hanging out in the cafe warehouse who does the exact same thing, turning a quiet tune into a bustling cafe atmosphere.
Okay, but we have to dedicate time to the crown jewel of this mechanic Village Bridge.
Oh, Village Bridge.
This location is one of the most relaxing, hauntingly beautiful spaces I ever encountered in a game. When you first arrive at this ancient stone bridge, the music is a very stripped-down, melancholic string tune. It feels a bit empty.
Intentionally empty.
Exactly. But scattered around this bridge are 4 different musicians. There's a guy beatboxing, doing voice percussion. There's a guy singing a mournful vocal track. There's someone playing acoustic guitar and someone playing a traditional grass whistle.
And you have to go find them.
You have to hunt down the source of the missing sound. As you speak to each one, their specific audio stem is injected into the master track. When you finally get all 4 playing together, the song transforms into this transcendent, perfect 4-part harmony.
It's an interactive symphony. Technically speaking, the game is running 5 separate audio tracks simultaneously on the DS hardware, adjusting the volume channels based on your interactions.
Which is crazy for that little handheld.
It really is. It requires the player to be present to actively participate in building the soundtrack of the world. It's a brilliant, nonverbal way of making the player feel integrated into the community of Unova. You aren't just passing through, you are the catalyst for their harmony.
You are. And it's gorgeous. But I want to push back on this audio design a bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because we can't talk about the brilliant dynamic audio of Gen 5 without talking about the most polarizing, debated sound in the entire game, the low HP siren.
Ah, yes. The siren.
It is genuinely stressful. Like in every previous Pokemon game, when your creature's health dropped into the red zone, the game would play a repetitive, high-pitched beep, beep over the standard battle music.
Right, it was annoying, but you tuned it out.
Exactly. But Game Freak decided to innovate here. In Black and White, when your HP hits that critical red zone, the entire background music, no matter what track is playing, is completely overridden by this frantic, anxiety-inducing, high-tempo, blaring siren beat.
It takes over everything.
Yes. Imagine you're fighting the champion. The music is epic, it's sweeping, you are entirely in the zone, feeling the grandeur of the moment. And then your Pokemon takes a heavy hit. Suddenly, the epic orchestra is violently muted, and it's just wee-woo, wee-woo at 140 beats per minute.
It really is jarring.
It feels exactly like a blaring fire alarm going off in the middle of a Beethoven symphony. Was this just a rare, massive misstep in an otherwise flawless audio design?
Well, it's a fascinating debate among game designers. If we look at it purely from an aesthetic standpoint, yeah, it completely shatters the musical composition. You lose the emotional high of the track. However, if we look at it from a psychological perspective, it is a triumph of design because it achieves exactly what Masuda wanted. It induces pure visceral panic.
Well, it certainly does that.
Think about the narrative reality of a Pokemon battle. We get lulled into treating it like a chess match with cool music, but the siren strips away the grandeur and the abstraction. It violently reminds you that your partner, the creature you've raised, is in critical, life-threatening danger.
Wow. I never thought about it like that.
It grounds the battle in a very stressful, immediate reality. It forces you to stop thinking about your long-term strategy and focus entirely on survival. It's abrasive by design.
That makes a lot of sense. It breaks the illusion that this is just a game of numbers.
Yeah.
And, to be fair, they also use this dynamic audio shifting to induce the exact opposite emotion, pure triumph.
Oh, absolutely.
When you're battling a gym leader and you manage to knock out their team until they are down to their absolute final Pokemon, the music shifts again. But this time, it changes into this incredibly triumphant, fast-paced, Indigo League-inspired remix of the main theme.
Yes, the victory is right before your eyes track. It's a brilliant use of a leitmotif. It signals the final stand. It completely changes the atmospheric pressure of the battle, making you feel like the protagonist at the climax of a television episode.
It is a pure dopamine injection. But this underlying concept we've been talking about, this idea of musical harmony, of missing layers needing to be sought out and brought together, of distinct, fractured parts forming a greater whole that is not just an audio quirk.
No, not at all.
That structure perfectly mirrors the central mythology of the Unova region itself.
Precisely. The missing stems of Village Bridge are basically a microcosm of the macro narrative. The transition from the audio engineering to the narrative lore is completely seamless because Unova is, at its absolute core, a story about a fractured whole desperately seeking harmony.
So let's unpack the Tao Trio. This is the mythological bedrock of the entire game, and it represents a massive departure from previous Pokemon lore. Usually we get gods of the land and sea, or gods of time and space. Here we lean heavily into ancient Chinese philosophy.
We are talking about the dragons Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem.
Right.
To understand the Tao Trio, we have to deeply understand the concept of yin and yang. In Unovan folklore, thousands of years ago, the region wasn't founded by a politician, but by twin heroes.
Okay.
And these heroes were assisted by a single, omnipotent entity known only as the original dragon. This dragon was whole. It was balanced. But, as inevitably happens with human nature, the twin brothers eventually reached a profound ideological impasse. They couldn't agree on how human society should be governed or what principles should guide the future.
The older brother sought truth. And the game is very careful in how it frames this. Truth, in this context, is represented as objective reality. It is about honesty, logic, and accepting the world exactly as it is, flaws and all. It's a grounded, almost scientific worldview.
Right.
The younger brother, however, sought ideals. Ideals are framed as subjective perfection. It's about ambition, dreaming, and relentlessly pushing for a world as it should be rather than how it is. It's a visionary, emotionally driven worldview.
And because neither worldview is inherently evil, neither brother would yield. The philosophical debate escalated into a physical war. But because the original dragon was deeply bound to the souls of both brothers, this ideological schism tore the creature apart.
It literally ripped it in half.
Yes. The dragon experienced a catastrophic biological fission. It split into two distinct opposing entities. Reshiram became the dragon of Yang. It represents light, heat, and fire, and it aligned with the older brother of truth. Zekrom became the dragon of Yin. It represents darkness, mass, and electricity, and it aligned with the younger brother of ideals.
The great tragedy of this myth is that because Reshiram and Zekrom used to be the exact same being, they were perfectly mathematically matched in power. Their battle was an endless stalemate. Their conflict completely devastated the Unova region with fire and lightning until they both exhausted their energy and eventually regressed into dormant crystalline stones, the light stone and the dark stone.
They just went to sleep.
They just went to sleep, waiting for human history to repeat itself with new heroes. But when you take a whole entity and violently split it into two absolute extremes, sometimes there are leftovers.
The math doesn't always divide cleanly.
Right. And that brings us to the most fascinating and frankly deeply unsettling creature in this lore, Kyurem.
Kyurem is a brilliant conceptual addition. If Reshiram and Zekrom represent yin and yang, Kyurem is the physical manifestation of Wuji.
Wuji. Okay, explain that.
In ancient Taoist philosophy, yin and yang are the active, dynamic, opposing forces of the universe. But before yin and yang existed, and outside of their influence, there is Wuji. Wuji translates roughly to without limit or the ultimate nothingness. It is the limitless void. It is the absence of energy. It is absolute emptiness.
Emptiness is the perfect, terrifying word for it.
Yeah.
Let's look at Kyurem's anatomy, because Game Freak designed it to visually communicate wrongness.
Yeah, it's very jarring to look at.
It's this asymmetrical 9-foot-tall draconian snowman. It's an ice type, which mechanically represents its lack of thermal energy, the complete absence of Reshiram's fire, and Zekrom's electric heat. Its body is visibly broken, one of its icy wings is stunted and damaged, one of its facial horns is chipped, which the deeper lore hints might be the result of a fierce, ancient battle with the mythical sword-fighting Pokémon Keldeo.
But the most disturbing detail comes from its Pokédex entries.
Oh yeah,
It states that Kyurem literally generates an aura of absolute zero to freeze its own cellular structure,
Ow.
simply to keep its physical body from falling apart.
that is so dark for a Pokémon game.
It is a creature fundamentally unstable in its own existence. It is holding itself together by freezing its own decay, and the lore surrounding where Kyurem actually came from is full of conflicting academic and folk theories within the game world.
Okay, let's look at those.
On one hand, you have Drayden. Drayden is the gym leader of Opalucid City. He's the mayor, and he is a dedicated dragon historian. He posits what we can call the shell theory. Drayden believes, based on ancient texts, that Kyurem is the literal biological empty husk left behind in the exact moment Reshiram and Zekrom split. It's a hollow vessel, and he believes it is waiting for a human hero to fill it back up with either truth or ideals using an ancient technological artifact called the DNA splicers, or the gene wedge in the original Japanese.
So that is the academic perspective. But then you travel to the far northeast of the map to a place called Lacanosa Town, and the old folks sitting in their houses tell a completely different, much darker story.
Oh, their story's terrifying.
They don't care about the twin heroes. They have this deeply ingrained generational folk memory that Kyurem is an extraterrestrial. They claim it arrived from space, crashing down on an icy meteor that carved out the massive crater known as the Giant Chasm, where it currently lives.
And their folklore isn't about philosophical balance, it's about survival.
Exactly. They say that years ago, Kyurem used to come out of the chasm at night, bringing freezing fog, and it would eat people and Pokemon.
It was a cannibalistic monster.
This trauma is so deep that the town built a massive fortified wall around their borders, and to this day, no one in Lacanosa Town steps outside after sunset.
It creates this brilliant narrative tension. Who is right? Is Kyurem an extraterrestrial entity of pure cosmic void that crashed to Earth? Or is it a biological tragedy, a byproduct born of human ideological conflict? Game Freak leaves it intentionally ambiguous, which has sparked some incredibly intricate fan theories attempting to reconcile the two.
Oh, the fan theories are the best part.
For instance, there is a vibrant debate about what the original dragon actually looked like before the split.
I am obsessed with the original dragon theories.
Yeah.
One of my favorites is the Druddigon connection.
Ah.
Druddigon is a pure dragon-type Pokemon native to Unova. Some fans with an eye for anatomy have pointed out very strange physical similarities between Druddigon and the Tau trio. The facial structures, the jagged wings, they suggest Druddigon might be an ancient genetic offshoot of the original dragon.
That's a fun one.
Others take a more elemental approach. They speculate that the original dragon must have been a dragon of normal type. Normal in Pokemon mechanics often implies a baseline, a balanced blank slate, before the volatile elemental extremes of fire, electric, and ice were introduced by the schism.
It's a sound theory mechanically, but whatever the original dragon looked like, the reality of Kyurem's current state is undeniably bleak.
It is, and I have to ask you, as someone analyzing the lore, isn't Kyurem essentially just a biological suit of armor?
How do you mean?
Think about it. If its entire purpose, according to Drayden, is waiting to be filled by the DNA splicers, it's like a massive battery that's been completely drained of its charge. It raises this incredibly unsettling philosophical question. Does Kyurem even possess a true soul or consciousness of its own? Or is it just a hungry, frozen automaton operating on pure survival instinct, waiting to be used and operated by humanity again?
That is a chilling perspective, but deeply supported by the text. Kyurem is a being defined entirely by what it lacks. It is an instrument waiting for an operator. And that core concept of beings being used, of the deprivation of autonomy, of the fundamental ethics of control, serves as the perfect bridge out of the ancient mythology and directly into the modern sociopolitical conflict of the Unova region.
Exactly. Because the ancient battle of truth versus ideals isn't just a bedtime story. It is actively, aggressively playing out in the modern day through the region's human antagonists, Team Plasma. Getzes was obsessed with creating a mathematically perfect ideal world. But, ironically, his methods required breaking the world apart.
Team Plasma poses an ethical dilemma that the Pokemon franchise had completely carefully avoided for 15 years. They ask the defining question, is Pokemon ownership a form of slavery?
It's a fascinating narrative choice. Game Freak is taking a premise that naturally echoes our own complex, real-world debates regarding animal captivity, zoo ethics, and wildlife conservation, and they're using it as the ideological foundation of their antagonists.
Right.
But I want to make sure we're clear for you listening. If we look strictly at the text of the game, without mapping our own real-world politics onto it, Game Freak uses this premise to explore the nature of radicalization. We are exploring the narrative themes designed by the developers impartially just to see what the story is doing.
Precisely. We are analyzing the literary structure of the game's narrative. And on this digital canvas, Team Plasma operates under a masterful facade of absolute moral superiority. Previous villains like Team Rocket and Kanto were just the Mafia. They stole Pokemon for profit, they are explicitly greedy.
They were just bad guys.
Right. But Team Plasma is far more dangerous because they believe they are righteous. They hold rallies in town squares. They actively preach that Pokemon are oppressed by humanity, that Pokeballs are literal prisons, and that the only ethical choice for a moral society is total, unconditional liberation.
And the face of this incredibly persuasive movement is a character known only as N.
N is arguably the most complex, tragic character in Nintendo's entire history.
Oh, absolutely.
He is the puppet king of Team Plasma. But what makes him so compelling is that his belief in Pokemon liberation isn't cynical. It isn't a grift. It is entirely heartbreakingly genuine. And it's genuine because of the deeply disturbing way he was raised.
N possesses a unique, borderline supernatural empathy. He can literally hear the voices and understand the complex thoughts of Pokemon. He speaks their language. But this beautiful, connective gift was systematically weaponized. He was raised in total isolation in a remote castle by his adoptive father, Getzes.
And Getzes purposefully curated N's reality.
He curated it maliciously.
He did. He surrounded young N exclusively with Pokemon that had been severely abused, abandoned, or traumatized by cruel humans.
It is a textbook, terrifying case of ideological grooming. Getzes controlled N's environment so absolutely that N's worldview was inevitably mathematically warped. N saw the immense suffering of these specific broken Pokemon and naturally extrapolated it to mean that all human-Pokemon interaction is inherently abusive.
Because that's all he knew.
Right. When N sets out to conquer Unova, he doesn't want to rule it. He wants to segregate the two worlds entirely to ensure Pokemon will be safe from human harm forever.
It's a tragic miscalculation based on flawed data. N's sample size of the world was entirely corrupted by his father.
I always think of the specific interaction early in the game. You're walking past a daycare center, and there's a random NPC, just a preschooler toddler, who walks up to you and says, change your perspective, and the reality changes.
Such a profound line for a toddler.
It's a heavy philosophical line for a toddler to drop in a video game. But it's the thesis statement for N's entire arc. Living with Getzes was like living in a funhouse mirror maze. N's truth was entirely manufactured. He was spoon-fed a distorted reality. Contrast that with you, the player character. You were out in the world, traveling the routes, experiencing the actual messy, beautiful, organic reality of humans and Pokemon working together, struggling together, and growing together.
Which is a crucial point in the community discourse surrounding the game's ultimate message. Because Team Plasma's arguments are initially so persuasive, a lot of players walked away thinking the game was suggesting that Pokemon ownership is genuinely a morally gray area.
Yeah, you see that debate online a lot.
But if you deeply analyze the text, the game actually argues the exact opposite. It argues that the core concept of partnership is not a gray area.
It's really not. Canonically, the game goes out of its way to establish the mechanics of consent. The lore states that Pokemon actively test their trainers in the wild. They fight you to gauge your worth. They consent to the partnership. They have the power to break out of Pokeballs at any time. But they choose to stay because they actively want to align their immense power with a human they respect to achieve mutual growth.
The game firmly states that forcing a Pokemon against its will or abusing it is unequivocally evil.
Right.
But the institution of partnership itself is a beautiful symbiotic chemical reaction. N's ideology was a tragic misunderstanding born of absolute manipulation.
And the architect of that manipulation, the true villain, is Getsys. If N is a tragic figure of misguided, bleeding heart ideals, Getsys is a figure of absolute unrepentant malice.
There is no tragic backstory that justifies Getsys.
None.
There is no redemption arc. He is purely a sociopath. He hid behind the noble progressive cause of Pokemon liberation purely to disarm the populace.
His actual goal was breathtakingly simple and entirely tyrannical. Think about it. If he could use N's genuine charisma to convince everyone in Unova to voluntarily release their Pokemon, then Team Plasma, who would secretly keep their weapons, would be the only group left with any power.
Exactly. The police would have no Arcanine, the gym leaders would have no dragons.
Getsys would rule a completely defenseless, pacified world unopposed.
It's a brilliant exploration of how easily noble causes and progressive language can be co-opted by bad actors for raw political gain. And what is truly fascinating is looking at the psychological fallout of this failure in the sequels, Black 2 and White 2, which take place 2 years later.
Oh man. The sequels offer a masterclass in depicting the psychological collapse of a dictator who has lost his audience.
They really do.
Because by the time Black 2 and White 2 happen, the curtain has been pulled back. The public has realized the truth. They know that Pokemon partnerships are consensual and based on love, and they know Team Plasma was a front. So Getsys' grand, sweeping speeches about liberation don't work anymore. No one is buying the propaganda.
His whole strategy relies on deception, and the deception is broken.
Right, and because he can no longer manipulate the masses with his silver tongue, and because his puppet N has abandoned him, Getsys completely loses his grip on sanity. He stops pretending to be a savior. He abandons the rhetoric and just resorts to raw terrorism, trying to literally freeze the entire Unova region solid using Kyurem by brute force.
He isolates himself in an echo chamber of his own madness, surrounded only by a few loyal yes-men.
It is a pathetic, terrifying, and fitting end for a mastermind.
But during his initial rise to power in the first game, Getsys was incredibly calculating. He understood human psychology. He knew he couldn't just declare himself king. To give his reign an air of historical, intellectual, and even divine legitimacy, he surrounded himself with a deeply symbolic inner circle known as the Seven Sages.
Okay, let's delve into the architecture of power here, because the deep lore behind the Seven Sages is an absolute rabbit hole of real-world history, mythology, and theology. Getsys didn't just hire thugs off the street to enforce his will, he actively sought out philosophers.
He essentially styled himself as a pope, and the sages were his cardinals. That is not an exaggeration of their aesthetic, it is a deliberate design choice.
Right.
Team Plasma's visual design borrows heavily from the Knights Templar and the medieval Catholic Church. The low-level grunts dress as crusading knights in chainmail-patterned tunics embarking on a holy war. The sages wear flowing, ornate robes that evoke high-ranking clergy.
And Team Plasma's logo, the emblem plastered on their shields and flags, is a stylized modification of the Chiro.
Explain the Chiro for those who might not know.
So the Chiro is one of the earliest symbols of Christianity, formed by superimposing the first two capital letters of the Greek word for Christ, which was famously adopted by the Roman Empire as a military standard.
And the rabbit hole goes so much deeper into the Byzantine Empire. I was blown away by this detail in the research. If you look at the specific color palette of Team Plasma, the stark blue, white, and black, and you pair it with that Chiro logo, it is not an accident.
What's the connection?
It perfectly mirrors a very famous, specific 6th century mosaic located in the Basilica of San Vitale in Ravenna, Italy. That real-world mosaic depicts the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I.
Okay, Justinian.
Justinian was known for his obsessive, brutal military campaigns aimed at restoring the lost glory of the ancient Roman Empire. In the mosaic, he is surrounded by his retinue, his clergy, and his soldiers, holding a shield emblazoned with the Chiro.
Wow.
Getsys is literally styling himself as a modern Justinian, trying to enforce an archaic monarchical rule under the guise of divine right.
And the character design completely confirms this Byzantine connection. In the sequels, when Getsys discards his Pope disguise, he wears incredibly ostentatious gold and purple robes.
Purple is the key there.
Yes. In the Byzantine Empire, purple pigment, Tyrian purple, extracted from sea snails, was so astronomically expensive and difficult to produce that it was restricted by law. It was reserved exclusively for the emperor and his family. This birthed the concept of being born in the purple, meaning born into supreme, unquestionable royalty.
Even the specific sage who remains loyal to Ghetsis and takes over the remnant of Team Plasma in the sequel is named Zinzalin. Zinzalin is an old French word that literally translates to a specific shade of reddish-purple. Game Freak coded royal supremacy into their very names.
But the title Seven Sages itself is what truly spans multiple human cultures. The game pulls mythological threads from everywhere to make this cult feel globally ancient.
Right, it's not just Western history.
When you battle the sages in the postgame, they don't hurl generic villain dialogue at you. They quote ancient Chinese proverbs. This is a direct reference to the Seven Sages of the Bamboo Grove, a real historical group of Taoist scholars, musicians, and poets in 3rd century China.
And what was their deal?
These men were so disgusted by the corruption of the royal court that they fled society to live in the woods, drink wine, and write poetry. They represent absolute liberty, freedom from governmental control, and living in harmony with nature, which is a brilliant, deeply ironic mirror to Team Plasma's stated but false goals of liberation.
It's the co-opting of historical virtue. Then you look at the Greek influence. Ancient Greece had its own legendary seven sages from the 6th century BC. These were foundational mathematicians, statesmen, and philosophers, like Thales of Miletus, who laid the absolute groundwork for modern geometry and deductive science. They were revered across the ancient world for their pithy sayings and moral maxims, which fits the highly formalized philosophical dialogue style of the sages in the game perfectly. The Greek connection even ties seamlessly into the geography of Unova.
Oh, Liberty Garden.
Yes. There is an island called Liberty Garden, which clearly parallels the Statue of Liberty in New York. But the real-world Statue of Liberty was heavily influenced by the iconography of the Greek goddess Hecate, a goddess of boundaries, crossroads, and magic. Game Freak is layering Greek mythology on top of American landmarks.
But the most obscure and arguably the most fascinating historical inspiration comes from ancient Mesopotamia. The Akkadian and Sumerian cultures had their own version of the Seven Sages, known in their texts as the Apkallu.
Yes, the Apkali are incredibly important to understanding Ghetsis' methodology. In Sumerian myth, the Apkallu were mythological demigods. They were often depicted as part human and part fish. According to the lore, they were created by Enki, the god of water, and they emerged from the Abzu, the deep, primordial, freshwater abyss beneath the earth. Their specific role was to bring the foundations of civilization, knowledge, science, agriculture, writing, and moral codes to humanity. They acted as divine advisors to ancient antediluvian kings, providing the intellectual justification for the king's divine rule. This maps exactly, point for point, onto what Ghetsis sages do for N. They are the divine advisors legitimizing a puppet king.
And Game Freak didn't just borrow the mythology, they literally built the Abzu into the map.
The abyssal ruins.
Yes. There is an incredibly mysterious optional area you can explore called the Abyssal Ruins. It is located deep underwater off the coast of Unova. You have to use the move dive to reach it. When you get down there, you're exploring a labyrinthine temple on the ocean floor that houses cryptic purple pillars and relics that the game explicitly states are 3,000 years old. You find ancient crowns and gold. They wove the Mesopotamian myth of the deep abyss right into the ocean floor.
The world building is just staggering.
But looking at all this incredibly deep intellectual world building, I have to ask you a character question. Why?
Why what?
Why would Ghetsis, who we have established is a purely evil, manipulative sociopath who cares nothing for philosophy, bother scouring the globe to gather genuinely brilliant, scholarly philosophers? Why not just hire heavily armed mercenaries? It seems like a massive risk to surround yourself with smart people if your goal is deception.
It's a brilliant question, and it speaks to the sophistication of political control. Ghetsis understands that raw physical force breeds immediate rebellion. If you point a gun at someone, they know they are oppressed and they will fight back. But if you have the smartest, most revered scholars in the world validating your ideology, the public is far more likely to surrender their critical thinking voluntarily.
It's the illusion of consensus. It reminds me of a corrupt, highly polluting corporation hiring a board of directors made up entirely of environmental scientists and Nobel laureates. You aren't hiring them for their ideas, you are buying their intellectual halo to mask your sinister intentions. If the smartest guys in the room say Team Plasma is right, who is a random trainer to argue?
Exactly. It's deeply cynical, and it shows the terrifying architecture of his control.
It is a mathematically perfect plan for domination. But for all the incredible, flawless intellectual architecture of Unova's lore, and for all of Ghetsis' obsession with an ideal, perfectly controlled world. The actual, literal digital world that Game Freak programmed had its own fascinating underlying
Oh,
imperfections.
absolutely. The math didn't always hold up.
Not at all. And that is the perfect segue. Getsy's wanted mathematical perfection, but the digital reality was literally cracking at the seams. Let's look at the game-breaking glitches, the broken code, and the mechanical quirks of Generation 5.
This is where things get really fun.
Every complex system has vulnerabilities, and we are going to take a relaxing, slightly humorous tour through the specific ways Unova's physics engine just completely gave up.
Well, when you build a video game with hundreds of interacting mechanics, weather states, and thousands of variables calculating simultaneously, the code is bound to snap somewhere. And the most infamous example of the math completely breaking in black and white is, without a doubt, the skydrop and gravity glitch.
This glitch is legendary. It wasn't just a funny visual bug. It was so fundamentally broken that Nintendo literally had to ban the move, Skydrop, from all official Wi-Fi tournaments worldwide.
They had no choice.
So here is the underlying mechanism of how you break the game's state machine. This glitch happens specifically in double or triple battles. You have one of your Pokemon use the move Skydrop. Skydrop is a two-turn move. On turn 1, your Pokemon grabs an opponent and flies them high up into the air.
Huh.
In the game's code, both Pokemon are now flagged with a semi-invulnerable state, meaning standard moves from the ground cannot target them.
Right.
But while they are suspended in the air on that specific turn, your other Pokemon uses the move Gravity.
And this is where the logic loops infinitely. The move Gravity is specifically programmed to alter the environmental state of the field for 5 turns. Its function is to bring flying or levitating Pokemon down to the ground. But the game's code simply could not reconcile these two simultaneous contradicting state commands.
It just panicked.
Basically, yeah. The engine processes gravity, and it successfully pulls the user of Skydrop back down to the ground. But the target of Skydrop, the code loses track of it. It fails to remove the semi-invulnerable flag from the opponent.
They are soft-locked. The opposing Pokemon is permanently suspended in this weird, invisible state of purgatory in the sky. Because they are flagged as semi-invulnerable, they cannot select a move to attack, and they cannot be hit by almost any move from the ground. They are just trapped.
It's basically a hostage situation in the code.
The only way the glitch ends is if the Pokemon is somehow knocked out by weather damage, or if the player physically resets their console. It's a complete mechanical breakdown of the turn order logic.
It's a fascinating look at how state machines function in programming, how a single missed Boolean flag can derail an entire combat engine. But beyond the battle math, there were also numerous environmental oversights, specifically collision and tile errors.
Oh, there's so many funny geographical anomalies.
Right, because when developers are placing thousands upon thousands of individual collision tiles in a complex 3D environment that is still functionally operating on a 2D grid matrix, human oversight is inevitable.
In the Dream Yard, there's a staircase leading down to a basement area. And right next to the stairs, there is just an invisible wall. It's just a row of tiles in the middle of open grass that you physically cannot walk on, for no logical reason other than a programmer accidentally clicked the solid brush on the map editor.
Just a slip of the mouse.
Or take the Iciris City Gym. This gym is designed as a complex ice-sliding puzzle where you have to perfectly calculate your trajectory, bouncing off rocks to reach the leader. But somebody simply forgot to assign collision data to 3 specific rocks. So instead of sliding around the puzzle, you can just casually walk right over the top of the rocks, completely bypass a trainer named Black Belt Thomas, and walk straight up to the gym leader, Bryson.
The Opelousas gym is a very similar Z-axis issue. The gym is designed as a labyrinth of giant, elevated dragon statues that you walk across. But on the specific ramp leading up to the first dragon's tail, a developer forgot to place collision barriers on the lateral sides. You can literally walk off the edge of the ramp, completely ignoring gravity, and stand suspended in midair over the abyss.
It's so funny.
There's another one deep in the Relic Castle down on floor B3F, where you can simply walk straight through a solid brick wall near a sand pit.
They're like little charming peek behind the curtain moments. They remind you that humans built this massive world. But my absolute favorite anomaly in the entire game is the old woman in Drickvale City.
Oh, she's iconic.
She is a total programming anomaly. If you walk into a specific house and talk to her, her text scrolls exactly 1 speed slower than whatever you have your global game settings on. If you have your text speed set to fast, she speaks on normal. If you have it on normal, she speaks on slow. And if you have your text speed set to slow, she speaks at a glacial, impossibly slow pace that isn't even a standard option programmed into the game's menu.
It's a missing block of parsing code. The game engine looks at her text file, attempts to apply the global text speed modifier variable, fails to parse it correctly, and defaults to a degraded speed state.
It's hilarious. It's like listening to a vinyl record playing at the wrong RPM.
Yeah.
But then you have glitches that reveal the sheer dizzying mathematical scale of the game's backend. The Trick Room Overflow is the best example of this.
Trick Room is a fascinating move. When used, it alters the fundamental physics of the battle for 5 turns. It reverses the turn order. The Pokemon with the slowest speed stat moves first, and the fastest moves last.
Which is a cool strategy.
Very cool. But it requires the game to run a complex recalculation formula every single turn. However, the game calculates these stats using a 16-bit integer system. In binary, a 16-bit unsigned integer has a maximum possible value of 65,535. If a player manages, through items and stat boosts, to push a Pokemon's effective speed stat to exceed exactly 1809, the Trick Room formula multiplier breaks that 65,535 ceiling.
The integer overflows. It's like an old car odometer hitting 999,999 miles and rolling back over to zero. The game's math simply cannot comprehend a number that high within the parameters of the Trick Room formula. It panics, wraps the number back to zero, and that astronomically fast Pokemon will simply ignore the Trick Room rules entirely and move first anyway.
It breaks the physical universe of the game.
I always wonder what it feels like to be the very first competitive player or speedrunner to discover something like that.
Yeah.
You are sitting there with a spreadsheet and a calculator, and you realize you just fundamentally broke the ceiling of the game's logic.
It's the thrill of discovery that keeps the community engaged for decades. And we should briefly mention the Japanese exclusive quirks, because there are a few glitches that were discovered and hastily patched before the game ever reached Western shores. For example, TM67, the move Retaliate. It's a normal type move, but in the initial Japanese release, a graphic designer made a mistake. The icon in the bag is colored black, indicating a dark type TM.
And we cannot forget the Nimbasa Gym glitch, which is pure unintended physical comedy.
Oh, this one is great.
In the Japanese release, the gym is themed around an amusement park, and you ride a series of roller coaster cars to reach the leader. If you battle a specific trainer on the platform named Lady Colette, and you happen to lose the battle while standing directly in front of her, you black out and get sent back to the Pokemon Center.
Right.
But when you return to the gym, her coordinates haven't reset properly. She is standing directly on the roller coaster tracks.
Her sprite coordinates fail to update to the safe platform zone upon reloading the map.
And when you get into the coaster cart to ride to the next area, the cart just plows right through her. You violently clip through her physical body, hop out on the other side, and then you can casually talk to her for a rematch. It's such a shame they fixed that coordinate error for the English release. It adds so much slapstick humor.
These glitches, these mathematical overflows and coordinate errors show the cracks in the code. They reveal the very human element behind the digital architecture. But Game Freak didn't just write flawed code. They also used that same code to create brilliant, intentional, deeply emotional bridges. Specifically, how they utilized code to connect 2 different points in time using the memory link feature.
That is the perfect pivot. Flawed code can break a game, but brilliant code can transcend it. Let's look at the echoes across time. Memory Link was such a profound experimental feature. When the sequels, Black 2 and White 2, came out 2 years later, they weren't just standalone games. You could physically connect them to your original Black or White cartridge using local wireless or the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection. And the sequel would literally read the save data from your cartridge from 2 years prior. It mined your history.
The operative keyword that the development team used for this feature was resonance. They didn't just want sequels that took place in the same geography, they wanted the games to broaden and validate each other's worlds. And the most immediate striking impact of the memory link was name persistence.
Right. Usually in video game sequels, the old protagonist you played as is relegated to vague lore. They are referred to as a legendary trainer or that kid from 2 years ago. They erase your specific identity for the sake of canon. But with Memory Link, the code reads your original input. Characters like N, your rivals Charon and Bianca, they actually speak your original character's custom name in the dialogue text boxes. They remember you.
It makes the history of the world feel incredibly, intimately personal.
I always describe the feeling of the Memory Link as walking through your old childhood home, but seeing someone else living there. It's your furniture, the scuff marks you left on the floor are still there, the people remember you, but you are a ghost observing it from the outside. It's deeply nostalgic and undeniably melancholy.
And that specific melancholy is perfectly encapsulated in what I consider the most brilliant mechanical integration of lore in this series, the hunt for N's released Pokémon.
Yes. Explain how this works.
If you triggered the memory link, you unlock a specific cinematic flashback showing N releasing his entire team of Pokémon in Chargestone Cave, telling them to go live free in the wild. And as you travel through Unova, in the sequel, you can actually encounter these exact specific Pokémon in the tall grass.
It is so emotionally resonant. The battle starts, but it's not a normal wild encounter. There's a unique entrance animation. A specific sparkle effect triggers, and a text box appears that hints this Pokémon seems to belong to someone else.
And the back-end mechanics completely back up the narrative lore. If you catch it, you realize you cannot rename these Pokémon. Their summary screen lists N as their original trainer.
Which is amazing.
And mathematically, they possess perfect 30 IV's individual values, the hidden genetic code of a Pokémon in every single stat.
Yeah.
They are practically genetically perfect, which reflects N's supernatural bond and his ability to draw out their absolute maximum potential. You are literally catching the remnants of the first game's story.
The flashbacks themselves provide so much vital closure to the world, too. You get to see intimate moments from the 2-year gap that you would otherwise never have access to. You see a flashback of the Strident gym leaders Salon, Chili, and Cress. In the original game, they're absent during the climax.
And players always wonder why.
Right. The flashback reveals the emotional fallout of this. They were confronted and brutally defeated by the Shadow Triad, Team Plasma's elite assassins. The flashback shows their deep shame and their painful decision to resign as gym leaders so they can embark on a journey to become stronger. You see gym leader Lenora stepping down to focus on her museum. It fills in the blank spaces of the timeline with genuine character growth.
It is an absolute masterclass in world building. It makes Unova feel like a place where time actually passes. But here's the tragic reality. The official Nintendo Wi-Fi server shut down years ago. The global link is gone. A lot of modern players picking up these games today might think that these incredible features or the old mystery gift event Pokemon like the mythical Victini or Mewtwo are just lost to time.
Erased by corporate server maintenance.
Exactly, but the Pokemon community is absolutely incredible when it comes to digital preservation. We found a highly practical, actionable tip in the YouTube sources for anyone playing these games on hardware today.
Yes, the community preservation effort is nothing short of remarkable. If you are playing on an original Nintendo DS or 3DS console, you can actually access fan-maintained servers to download these old, long-gone events.
It is a simple matter of DNS spoofing.
You go into your console's internet settings, you turn off auto-obtain DNS, and you manually change your primary DNS setting to a specific IP address, 164.132.044.106.
Let me repeat that for the note takers. Primary DNS 164.132.044.106.
By doing that, you bypass the dead official Nintendo servers, and your console connects directly to a fan-run archive. You can boot up your decade-old game, click on Mystery Gift, and download the Liberty Pass to go catch Victini. You can get the world's 2012 Pikachu that knows the move Fly. You can get the legendary Mewtwo event.
It is a staggering achievement of reverse engineering, and it proves that the Resonance Game Freak wanted to create that deep emotional connection between players has actually outlasted the official hardware. The community refused to let the history die. They kept the memory alive.
It is a beautiful, profound irony. The video game, fundamentally about truth, ideals, and the unbreakable connections between people, is currently being kept alive and functional purely by the shared ideals and connections of its fanbase. The medium perfectly reflects the message.
It really, truly does.
And that beautiful thought brings us to the end of our journey today. We have covered a massive amount of ground for you all. We have walked the soothing, alienating, dynamic streets of a New York-inspired Unova, analyzing how the developers used modernism to break our habits.
We've listened closely to the tambourines and accordions layer into the atmosphere, requiring our active participation.
We've waded through the deep, philosophical waters of ancient, fragmented dragons and dissected the manipulative, history-obsessed architecture of Team Plasma's cult. We've peeked behind the curtain at the literal broken math of the code and celebrated the community that preserves the echoes of the past.
Pokémon Black and White fundamentally challenged the parameters of what a Pokémon game was allowed to be. It asked us to leave our comfort zones, to question our ingrained perspectives, and to actively seek harmony in a fractured, complex world. It was a risk that paid off in artistic dividends.
It took the familiar, comfortable X-ray of the Pokémon formula, shattered it on the floor, and painted an absolute masterpiece in the murky waters left behind. Before we sign off, I want to remind you one last time, if you enjoyed the immense depth of this research, please go visit Decoding the Dark on YouTube, drop a like on their videos, and subscribe to their channel. They do the heavy lifting in the code that makes deep dives like this possible.
We owe them, and the entire preservation community, a great deal of thanks.
As we let the lights dim and the layered music fade out, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. We spent a lot of time talking about Kyurem, the empty shell, the terrifying manifestation of Wuji, of limitless emptiness, endlessly freezing its own decay.
Right.
We know from Drayden's lore that the DNA splicers are functionally incomplete. They can only handle fusing Kyurem with one dragon at a time, either Reshiram or Zekrom, because Kyurem's biological state is simply too vicious, too unstable to hold both opposing forces simultaneously.
The technology of humanity and the vessel of Kyurem is currently insufficient to restore the ancient past. The math doesn't work.
Right. But what if it did? What if humanity, in its endless, terrifying ambition, actually succeeded in building a perfect machine? What if we managed to force the math? Imagine if we forcibly fused Kyurem, Reshiram, and Zekrom back together all at once. Would the reborn original dragon be a glorious savior? A perfect luminous being that finally balances truth and ideals in absolute utopian harmony? Or, because it has been fractured, traumatized, and decaying for thousands of years, would it be an uncontrollable eldritch force of nature? A cosmic anomaly of immense gravity that simply erases the boundaries of reality entirely, returning everything, humans, Pokémon, the entire Unova region, to the silent, empty void of Wuji. Let that cosmic thought settle in the quiet of the room. Until next time, thanks for taking the deep dive with us.